In an earlier video, we looked into the distinction between moderation and mediation. Let's make life a bit more complicated and introduce moderated mediation and mediated moderation. As a recap, moderation refers to a third variable that affects the relationship between a dependent and an independent variable. Mediation is the case where a variable explains the relationship between an independent and a dependent variable. As an example, we talked about trust in politics and how trust in politics is related or is predicted by the number of days it takes to form a coalition government. And that relationship might be moderated by Z, the economic business cycle. In economic downturns, people may be less forgiving if politicians take a long time to negotiate a coalition, and this may lead to lower levels of political trust as compared to the context of economic prosperity. We also introduced M, which had to do with the stability of governments, and we said that the relationship between the number of days it takes to form a government and political trust may be explained by the stability of the government that results from a lengthy process. Long decision-making processes lead to less stable, so this would be a negative relationship, less stable governments, and less stable governments lead to lower trust in politics. This would be a positive relationship, and the combination of the two is a negative one. Now let's look into moderated mediation and mediated moderation. What these two basically do is they take one of these two models and add the other form to it. So, moderated mediation is a mediation model between X and the mediator and Y. And then it continues to argue that the mediation paths may be affected by a moderator. Let's say Z1 or Z2. If it comes to a mediation analysis, as you've seen, there are two relationships between the independent and the mediator, and between the mediator and the dependent, and both can of course be influenced by external factors. What I'll look into here is different moderators for these two relationships. One could technically also envision a single moderator that affects both the relationships alike, or a moderator on only one of these two paths in between the variables. Now let's look into what this might be like a bit. So what we have here is the days it takes to form a government, and that leads to unstable coalitions. It may particularly lead to unstable coalitions if there's a lot of fragmentation in politics already. If there are, for example, many political parties. So here we could say that the relationship between how long it took to form a coalition and the stability of that coalition is affected by the political fragmentation. In turn, the relationship between the mediator, political instability, and trust in politics may be affected by another moderator. Unstable governments may, for example, lead to lower trust even more when conflicts within a government are out in the open. So the extent to which conflicts within a government are public or become public may translate into a even more, and we have here a positive, so even more positive relationship between the mediator and the dependent variable. So this is what moderated mediation looks like. Mediated moderation starts from the model where there's an x variable that leads to y, and then there's this moderating variable that affects the relationship. Again, days taken to form a coalition, trust in politics, and here what we have again, the economic downturn. And what mediated moderation does is that it says that the effect of the effect of the moderator goes through a particular process. So it is again the mechanism that explains why the mediator has an effect. The mechanism here may be crisis situations. Economic downturn may lead to the perception that there is a crisis, hence we urgently need a new government, and if it takes longer to form one, then our trust in politics will be even more affected. There could be other moderators, such as whether there's a war going on, for example, that similarly lead to the idea of there being a crisis. So there can be multiple moderators that are channeled through a single mediator to affect a relationship between an independent and a dependent variable. If you want to estimate models like this, things soon become complicated. There is an add-on for SPSS available that is explained in a book that I will edit into this video at a later stage. And this book explains some standard models that are pre-programmed into the add-on. And you could use those to estimate such models. In general, these models are the more complicated forms of statistical modeling. You have to be aware of what you're doing if you would consider developing models like this.